Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast, where I'm going to be speaking with Jack McEwan from the Perth-based indie rock band Psychedelic Porn Crumpets. This band is one of my favorite bands out right now, and I only found out about them upon them releasing their last album, Shyga, the Sunlight Mound, in February of 2021. It was one of only 2 albums that I gave a 5.0 rating because it absolutely kicked ass. As if that wasn't enough new music, they're already set to release their brand new album, Night Gnomes, on Friday, April 22nd. We'll dig in even more and everything else about Psychedelic Porn Crumpets right after this. You're listening to the Powered by Rock podcast with your host, Isaac Kuhlman. The Powered by Rock podcast was created to help showcase some of the best rock musicians in the world and to pass on to future generations the rock music that has inspired rock fans around the world for decades. We want listeners to be able to hear great stories and life experiences directly from their favorite artists, as well as dig deeper into music theory and talk rock like no other show you've ever heard. This isn't about looking cool, it's about getting real and having a great time. Without further ado, let's start the show. All right. Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. I'm pretty pumped today because I get to speak to someone who I consider to be one of the most multi-talented wizards on the planet, Jack McEwan from the Psychedelic Porn Crumpets. Hey, Jack, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much for having me on.
Awesome. So before we dig into the kind of the new stuff and kind of talk about the music, I just want to quickly, because I know anybody can look this up on Google, but I want to bring up the fact that this wasn't actually a musical project to start, which I find is pretty interesting because it was actually, you were in graphic design, like you were in school for graphic design from memory, and it kind of, you were challenged to make music out of it. Is that pretty much how it went?
Yeah, so we were doing a branding project, I think, of just something that we were sort of interested in. And I mean, at the time growing up in Perth, there was like Tame Impala and Pond and those kind of bands kicking around. And I thought, I'll just make a fake band and brand it so I could sort of show people, I don't know, later on that that's sort of the style that I was kind of keen for.
Yeah.
And then my lecturer was like, he really liked the sort of design what we're doing. I think it was the logo that we have now. And a couple
of mushrooms and stuff on it.
Yeah, and a couple of the original posters that we had. And he was like, if you have any music, just put it towards it. And I was like, yeah, I'll give it a crack. I think I wrote Marmalade March, Cornflake, and Cubensis Lenses. And I was just like, this is kind of interesting. And it's like, all right, maybe I'll keep going. But I mean, I was a musician before. It wasn't like they were the first 3 songs I ever wrote. It was like, well, all right, we'll keep them. But
It's just that's how it shifted into this particular project.
Yeah, I was one of these nerds just tapping away, making beats.
Yeah, well, that's awesome because, I think that it's probably both that you're one of the most talented graphic artists that I've seen that does, music as well. I know John Gorley from Portugal the Man's another guy that does his own artwork for a lot of his stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool stuff. But I do have to ask, and you can feel free not to answer, but this is something that's on the internet out there. So I'm just going to ask this question, but did you guys as a band meet through a mutual friend who may or may not have also been a dealer of psychedelics?
Yeah, no, he was definitely our drug dealer, if that's what we're trying to pass around. Yeah, it was, he worked at, we're all hanging around at his house, and that was sort of our Saturday night, or like kind of Friday. I think it was literally every Friday night we'd go around to this one house, and it was just, there was no furniture or anything. I think there was a sofa, and there was a drum kit, and I'd brought around a guitar amp. And so Rich used to come around to this house randomly, and I remember him being really good at drums, and he was also amazing at guitar. And so I think, our friend had showed him one of the songs. I think he showed him Cubensis. He was like, who did this? And I've had it saved in my phone for like Luke Jams for years. I was probably about 6 months before he actually messaged. And I was like, I never thought you'd call me. So I was like, and then we sort of got the band going from there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I won't say most bands start like that, but at some point bands end up playing in places like that because they have nowhere else to play, because they're like, let's just go to a house party of somebody who's like basically about to move, or literally is just like college roommates that have no furniture in their house, and that's where they're going to play.
Yeah, it's either starting there or ending there. So
yeah.
I think,
Hopefully starting there and going up, because if you're ending there, you're not in a good place.
No, probably not.
So now I don't want you to take this the wrong way, because I never hope you stop ever making music because it's so damn good, but it's pretty clear that you're also a pretty talented graphic artist and you can make some pretty cool stuff. So do you ever feel like maybe you lost out on doing that more full time, or were you always more interested in the music?
Oh yeah, definitely more interested in music. 'Cause we did like when I was first starting, I think I was doing a couple bits and pieces for branding, and it was more corporate though. I was working for like over here. It's like the way you sort of find work is like in the mining sort of areas. So I was
Yeah.
doing like corporate work for a surveying company, and then I think by the time I actually sort of left uni and then started doing other work, I was only doing like posters for friends, and I was doing a bit more like branding work for like small clients who wanted to just brand themselves in like a theater industry. So I kind of chose like design work instead of being like I couldn't work in the mining industry anymore. I was just like, man, it's so soul draining. It's just like suit and tie going in. So I ended up
Yeah.
working on a building site for like 2 years instead. So I was like, it's way better. I can go out. I'm still getting a bit of exercise. And apart from when it was like the middle of winter and you're just freezing and your fingers
Yeah.
are like, I'm gonna snap off. Like, so I was like, yeah. And then started working on a bar. So that was the yeah. My career went use your degree, and then everyone always ends up at the bar. So
Yeah, and I can imagine if you're doing any sort of marketing work for corporations, which I've actually helped people and worked with people who did marketing for corporations, I can only imagine how boring the artwork and the branding and all that stuff is, because they got to be like completely pretty much bland, so that way nobody's ever offended by anything that looks like anything that could be related to their
yeah,
branding.
that's it. So it's not really creative as much as it is sort of just following the pattern of, I suppose, what's been done before. But I mean, I'm really grateful that they gave me a job because, yeah, Paul, who I worked for, was just a friend's dad. So he had
Yeah.
no real reason to hire me, but he did. I was like, all right, sweet. Yeah, good bloke, man.
Awesome. So let's jump into the music. But before we get into Night Gnomes, which I'm super excited about because you've already released 4 of the songs off that album and they are fantastic. I do want to go back to Shyga and some of the other stuff real quick, but let's talk about Shyga, the Sunlight Mound first, because I absolutely love that album. I like all of your albums, and I will say that there's kind of an evolution. We'll kind of get back to that in a second here. But when I first stumbled upon the album, I was like, this is insane. Like, you don't get much Australian independent rock music here in the United States. You have to go digging for it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you might get like, AC/DC's new album comes out here, but even then it's like, still, it's
yeah.
not even that popular anymore. And they're like the most famous band. So it's quite hard to find Australian music. And I did live in Australia for like 4 months back in 2015. So I absolutely
Oh,
love the country.
true.
So, but I think it's a perfect album for so many reasons. And I think the main reason why I gave that album a perfect score is because it rips like super hard and super fast for the entire album with only a couple, like a small intro or like a sample here or there. And then it does remind me of these big bands like Kiss or AC/DC, but way better in my opinion.
I
And
see.
yeah, I know this isn't the sound you've always really relayed for your full album. So why did you guys decide to tighten that up for the songs on Shyga versus like, Cubenz's Lenses, where it's, you know, 7 minutes of guitar work in there?
Yeah, no, I think that was just the point. I think when we were, I don't definitely in the songwriting process. I remember listening to like loads of, I mean, there was sort of that 70s kind of style of writing songs where you could go into the Cream world or you could go into the Zeppelin world or like the Pink Floyd world. I think that's where we were all starting off, and it was
Yeah.
like more of a indulgent musician kind of band. Like you'd love to jam, it'd be like an hour, and you try and condense it and be like, it can't be less than 9 minutes because that's the way the song should be. And I think it was only until sort of like writing songs, then I started to sort of find bands that I'd listened to younger, like Queen, for instance, where I was like, oh, this song's useless. It goes for like 2 minutes. And now you listen to it again, like talking about a song about riding a bicycle, but it's insane. It's like,
Yeah.
it's so structured, there's parts there. And I was like, what is actually happening? I think, and then started finding a new appreciation for those sort of types of music. So I think it was like, after a while, the song itself is bigger than any artist. So it's like, I don't
Yeah.
know, like a lot of people like music for a musician, or they like Hendrix forever. But then obviously he had an amazing band, so you could pick out different parts. But the song itself was always well structured, like give or take a like 2 minute solo. But there was
Yeah.
like, you could still say it was kind of structured. So I think we just started focusing on that a bit more. And then now I don't know. I think from the Shyga thing, it was like, yeah, maybe we could have worked on a couple bit more passages of how it could have led elsewhere and develop into the song. But I think it was just like I was just really happy with listening to like a minute of music at the time. So everything, I even felt like it went for about 2 minutes too long. I was like, just cut it down, cut it down, cut it down.
Yeah, I think maybe the longest song on there, I think it's the last one, it's like 5.5 minutes. But aside from that, because that's kind of like, it is almost kind of like two songs in one from memory. But yeah, most of them are like 3.5 minutes. And I think it's just fantastic. Like the I guess the way that it, like, because most of the songs just start out as if like they're starting in the middle of the song. It's just like go, and you're just going. I'm like, holy shit, this thing is going so fast already. And the way that you're able to kind of play the guitar, and obviously you have another guitar player in the band, but the way that you're able to play the guitar and sing and keep in time, I'm like, I don't even know, this looks like some sort of wizardry, because I just don't get what's happening right now. I'm like, there's only a few people that I can say that actually can do that really well. But I will talk about that in a little bit more and more detail here as well. But I do want to talk about the evolution of the recording of the music as well, because you guys did obviously say, like you took the jams and you kind of just did that kind of jam thing, for a while. But does it feel like because you're about to say it, but does it feel like you're kind of changing more towards the tighter songs, or do you feel like you're going to still have room to riff on the albums, or are you saving that kind of the riffing and the jamming for more of the live stuff?
Yeah, I think like there's a way where I think from me writing, like, because Porn Crumpets started off a bit of a solo project, and I was like, I'll use it as like the moniker of releasing anything. And I think after a while, it obviously has become this band. So,
Yeah.
and we started doing the big hour-long jams or whatever. Like that was sort of the songs, and then I still love bands like Sleep, and still like, I mean, Dope Smoke, what a fantastic record that is. But like, sort of going from songwriting, I was just throwing loads of stuff away that might not have worked in Porn Crumpets. So it's like all this material that are like, oh, that wouldn't work, this wouldn't work, this wouldn't work. And we're like, oh, we'll use this. And I think instead of trying to pigeonhole ourselves into like what Porn Crumpets was, I think go back into like, be like what it can be. So I wouldn't mind just changing genre as many times as possible, but we always know we can go back and do the riff thing. Like I think Lava Lamp Pisco on the new record, it's such a like encapsulating sort of track of like where we are and what we sort of were meant to sort of do and be. So it's nice. I think there's refreshing tones on Night Gnomes that sort of do come back for the older listener, but also there's sort of ways forward where you're like, oh, I wouldn't have expected that on High Visceral, that part one. So
yeah, it's funny that you did mention Lava Lamp Pisco, because I will talk about that as well. Obviously, it's one of the new singles off the new album, but I will admit that one of the things I struggle with at times about your music is to easily understand what the hell you're talking about, because I feel like without having done mushrooms in my life or doing any sort of LSD or anything like that, some of the stuff kind of goes over my head. I'm like, yeah, no, you definitely talk about being, seeing something hallucinogenic here. Is it just hard for me because I'm not taking, hallucinogenics or LSD or mushrooms, or is it kind of the way that you write it is more of an emotion thing versus like a descriptive thing?
Yeah, I think probably more of an emotional thing. Like a lot of it's kind of like Shyga, for instance, that was like a tour diary of when we were like probably the years 2019, 2018. I think as we just released whatchamacallit, and then from up to that year of touring, so it was sort of this diary kind of passage. Whereas Night Gnomes has been like pretty sober on this end. Like, yeah, try and get any drugs into like during a global pandemic. This is nothing. So just like, all right, might as well.
It's like you don't want to be like those guys that ended up in the Bali 7 or whatever it was, the ones that ended up in getting all hanged and stuff or whatever. You don't want that.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah, like I think we'll stay sober. We'll just write a record about sort of, I don't know, self-discovery and love. Nah, I think it's
Well, the next one will be about being rich and famous and living in Beverly Hills, obviously.
Oh man, but I'd love to write a record like that. Yeah.
That's the epitome of like what, Joe Walsh rates them, the Weezer's written those kinds of ones. It's like, that's what when you get rich and famous, you forget about all the little people problems. You talk about how hard it is to be rich and famous.
We had a really funny idea where it was like every single band that's got big has always had a song with either California in it, or like all you have to do is write a single, be like, and have California in the title, and you're going to live in California because that's where you're ending up. You're going to play out like, I don't know, huge shows in Hollywood, Bowl or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good idea because our friends, who were they? Who we tour with? Nothing But Thieves. We did a tour with them in Australia, and they had a track called Amsterdam. And we're like, why do you call it Amsterdam? Like, because we just wanted to go there. So like, and now they're big in Amsterdam, so they got a track called Amsterdam. So like, oh, it's genius. So our next record is up there, like the North Pole. We'll see if we can get big there.
You'll get all those, polar bears or whatever.
Yeah, that's it.
Because they live in the North Pole, right?
Why do we call this Paris?
Yeah. So along these lines, I believe that a lot of your song titles don't always match up to what the song is actually about, and instead just kind of are picked out of thin air in some instances. But I know you have mentioned that, at least for the new song Bob Holiday, not written about Bob Holiday, just that's the song title. But other ones like Puke Box and Mundungus seem a bit like song titles that are just cool titles. Am I off base, or is that semi-accurate for some of the song titles?
Yeah, I think a lot of them sometimes are just like on a night out, someone will just say something funny. Like I remember, I think Mundungus was a Harry Potter reference. That Mundungus, because my friend would always just be like Mundungus, and then like, I was just like, oh, that's amazing. So we put that down.
I will say, oddly enough, Mundungus might actually be a more apt title for the song Tripolosaur, because you say actually trying blends of cigarettes you'd never smoke, but Mundungus is actually a foul-smelling tobacco. So just a little...
there you go. Man, did not even know that. Yeah, well, that's probably what we should have been. We'll switch them around.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if the Mundungus is called Tripolosaur as long as Mundungus matches with the cigarette reference.
Yeah, I really should Google stuff before I do make it the title of the song as well. So I remember that, like, it took about, well, I think the Night Gnomes record had been finished for like a year until we've actually got to the point of doing, sort of obviously talking about the record and getting it pressed and going through the label with it. But so when they listened to it, it'd been like already out there in the ether or whatever. And they were like, who's Bob Holiday? I was like, I don't know, it sounded like a funny name. They're like, he's like an actor who played Superman. I was like, oh dear, like, let's look him up. Is he cancelled? Like, oh no, he's all good. Like, so
it turns out he's just a terrible, terrible person, and now you've got a song called that, and has nothing with him.
Oh man, it was a worrying moment. But thank you, Bob Holiday, for being a genuinely lovely man.
All right, so let's go back to the first few albums real quick before then we go back to Night Gnomes, which will be kind of the thing we talk about next. But, a lot of it seemed like mushrooms were a major influence on many of the songs, and musically it's like a modern version of Pink Floyd in a lot of ways, like we talked about with the jam and the guitar and stuff like that. It's probably why I like your band so much in general, because like I'm a super fan of Pink Floyd. It's my absolute favorite band of all time. You can pull in these psychedelic songs now into tight rock songs, and if you go into some deep cuts with Pink Floyd, if you go on to like some of their Obscured by Clouds and stuff like that, they actually played tight music on those, and it sounded more like the Beatles than Pink Floyd on some of those songs. And I was like, holy shit, why didn't they put out more of this? But they were just Pink Floyd. They did whatever they want. But, on High Visceral 1 and 2, there's some common themes about drug use, and obviously that's a band name too. But were you experimenting more drugs then? Because you'd mentioned that you're not doing it now because you couldn't during a pandemic. But is that another reason why the songs were a bit more drawn out? Is it just because that's how you were writing them at the time?
Yeah, probably. I think as well, like when we like between 2014 and 2015, and so I was like 21, 22. So I think it was just I was at that age where I was probably just going out experimenting more, and rather than sort of feeling like pushing 30 now, where you're just like, I don't want to lose any more brain cells. Like, I'm completely happy being the moron I am. Like, that's it, I'll take it. So yeah, but back then it was just like, I don't know, just silly sort of living. And I think I made like some interesting stories. Like, and I think because it was like our first record, there's 3 months in between a lot of those songs, and it was sort of the best songs that I'd had previously, sort of maybe a little project that I was doing that wouldn't work, like Steph's Up. Me and Danny wrote like probably when we were in school, so that was like 16 or 17. So there's been things floating around, and Found God and Tomato I wrote after like a trip at school or whatever, or just afterwards. And then so it was sort of like the best 10 songs that we'd had and I'd had put together. So it sounded like, oh man, they must be absolutely off their chops. But it was sort of like, I suppose, the best of 2 years or 3 years of sort of songs worth of bits and pieces and ideas and weekends got together. But then obviously when we started playing gigs and heading out, like it was getting more and more like, I know those weekends were just spiraling into one. And I think that's what happens when we do go on tour. Like every night is pretty much a Saturday night, and someone's there and be like, man, these guys are loose. Like, let's get them more fucked up than they've ever been there. live, and you get there, like, I don't know, and you're on a Tuesday night in Cleveland or something, like, oh, hungover from the first one, like, man, that, yeah, like, somewhere before was insane. And then you get to the next place, and then it's like the same dude with the same hair, like, it almost, there's like cartoon characters, and they're like, we're gonna get you more fucked up than you ever. You're like, oh, please, no. Like, I just can't do it anymore. But
well, and then there's the whole thing of like, if you're Australian, you must just be able to drink like a fish and party like a rock star all the time anyway, because that's the reputation, right?
It's weird. You almost, like, as soon as someone's like, coward, you're like, what did he say? Like, give me that beer. Like, all right,
yeah. It's like, no, guys, I'm totally sober. No, you're not. Yeah. Here, have this. You're Australian.
That's it. You just can't say
and
no.
I will say that I think, obviously one of the most popular songs you guys have is Found God in a Tomato, which is about you finding God in a tomato at a party. One of the longest songs at 9 minutes. I think it is your longest song. Do you think that you're going to kind of go back into that? Like, because we touched on a little bit, but do you feel like you'll go back into those that maybe have, maybe not just like longer, more instrumentation, but a bigger narrative, maybe something like, like a Led Zeppelin or a Pink Floyd or a Rush that actually has a longer story involved?
I think definitely. I think basically with the first record, I think I'd been in bands before, but they were like school bands, and sort of maybe we played in other bits and pieces that were kind of a bit more indie pop. And obviously, like I was saying, I'm doing like electronic music and trying to make like big club bangers. And so I think like I was really into Tool and Mars Volta and those bands. So it was sort of like trying to work a way where I was writing sort of lyrical bass as well into big sort of narratives and trying to change it. But then it's taken me 5-6 years until that song came out to be like, I don't know why it worked at the time. And I think I've sort of got to do my apprenticeship in songwriting first to be like, all right, I need to be able to write a song to the bare bones of like 2 minutes and work out why that's good, and then build it into going back to Found God in a Tomato. Because I think the more you sort of realize, we were just young and we were just like, oh, this sounds good, like we'll throw it together, do this. And it wasn't, I suppose, as collaborated and as thought out as what we're even doing for a 2-minute song now. But it worked. And I think, is that why it worked? Because it was just us kind of riffing and doing bits and pieces and not caring. But I mean, eventually the plan would be like, get to Jeff Buckley level of being able to write beautiful music.
Yeah, that's not a bad aspiration either. I mean, one of the best songwriters of all time. So
exactly, I think we can get there.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the new album Night Gnomes, because the first 4 singles, as I mentioned, have been released to this point via an EP of sorts. It's basically just single by single, but now you can see it on Spotify, most streaming services, kind of like an EP. And they are great songs. I'm really blown away by how they all flow together too, because when I first started hearing them kind of come out, I was like, well, this is different. Everything you do is different. But I was like, this seems a little different than the last thing. This seems a little different than that last single. And then by the time I got to the 4th one, I started to kind of see how it was all starting to kind of become cohesive again. So I was just curious, like what, like over the, over the course of the album, what can people expect? And, is there like more to the puzzle that they haven't seen yet that you can shed some light on?
Yeah, I mean, but it's an 11-track record, so that comes out on the 22nd of April. So we sort of obviously released these 4 singles, but in a way that I think was quite indicative of the record, how it's sort of, it starts off big, but then there's sort of patterns of flowiness, but everything's sort of going back to a bit more heartfelt, I think, because obviously Shyga and tracks like Mundungus, where it was just like party anthems, where it's like, all right, there's no room for feelings or emotions. And I think that was sort of something that a lot of fans were like, nah, like give us the Denmark from the original records, a bit more string based. So I think we're just trying to find that balance. Like, I think with Night Gnomes, it was sort of what an album I think we wanted to do, which for a long time, which was write something kind of beautiful, but obviously not have we just didn't feel like we were sort of comfortable enough to release our feelings and emotions, because you're in a rock band, so it's just like, and it's still in a way that it's heavy and there's still tracks that are there, but I think there's songs like Sherbet Straws, for instance, that would never have been on any record, and Microwave Dave, and the last track, Slinky, really proud of. I think it was it slowed down, but it's sort of, we needed to learn about production, why this works and why that doesn't work, and everything has been this evolution for us to be like, what's a song, why are we working? And I think you'd be a bit more if you like the longer songs, this is probably like a good album to sort of go. I think the longest is about 6 minutes, but it's starting to get there, and I think I again am starting to understand like trusting these. Well, there's speakers in front of me, but trusting them rather than my brain of being like, it has to work because this goes with that chord, and then you listen back to it like a couple years later, and you're just like, oh man, it's so rough. Like I should have taken this out. So
Yeah.
there's part where you're just like, all right, start from the drums to the bass to the guitars, and then your vocals, and where everything sits in the spectrum. And there's obviously a lot I would change even now in Night Gnomes. I wish I could still be tinkering with it, but it sounds, there's a stage where what we're doing from where we're recording, I think we're just trying to become better songwriters and better producers, and then eventually by the time we're like 50 we can just be like thoughts and just be like
Just become a projection of music.
yeah, I am the project.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, every time I've ever worked on an album for myself or with a band, I literally am always like, that's not good enough. And then I'm just like, you know what? It's gotta be done at some point. Might as well be now. And it's just like, just let it go. You can move on to another project and make that one better.
That's it. That's exactly it. Because at the moment I've gone from, because I was like, obviously back-to-back records with Porn Crumpets from lockdown with no tours in the middle, doing Shyga, doing Night Gnomes. And I know there was like a lot of interest to be like, I think you should keep writing another record. And I was like, if I write another record, like I can't do it at the moment because one, we haven't toured the last two. If we come do another place, everyone's gonna be like, oh, they're way ahead. And I think you can't lose your fan base or lose, like, music is difficult to listen to. Like people don't have the time anymore as much as they would, or they kind of listen to a record, but you kind of don't want to overdo it. So I was like, all right. And I've started doing this little acoustic thing where I'm just trying to work out, like I said before, like what the song is, why it sounds good, why it's there. And I was like, I think having that break, now I'm getting all these other ideas for Porn Crumpets because you procrastinate, and it seems to be a way where you can just go back and ideas come to you. And I think even if it's just something different, I think having that, you don't want to burn out what you know is decent. So a break is probably a great thing, even though it's not a break. We're about to release a record, but for me, it's just like, all right. I think having 6 months off is a big break. So
yeah, exactly. All right. So as a fellow guitar player, I got to say you absolutely shred. I mean, you're like a mix of David Gilmour and Eddie Van Halen, which I don't think most people even understand how actually damn good you are. So I have to ask, just because this is part of this podcast is also to help people who are trying to figure out how to be better at music and play music better and all that stuff. You got any tips for like people? I've been playing for 25 plus years on guitar. I play some drums, I play some bass, sing, songwrite, do all the production, which the production is the worst part. I'm god awful at that. But, it took me like 20 years to be good at playing a pentatonic scale, for example. It's like, I feel comfortable now to be able to solo a little bit. And I never tried finger tapping until like 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm like, okay, now I can actually play some stuff. But were there like any hurdles or, anything that you were like, okay, once I get past this, then it felt like you were kind of like on just a whole new level of guitar playing?
I think that always happens. Sort of when you're beginning, there's sort of smaller sort of sections of, I don't know, personal sort of best. So you're just like, if I can do Smoke on the Water, and then I get to that, and then you sort of like build up. And I mean, I think once I did I think it was Unknown Wall Orchestra. I remember like watching Ruben Nielsen play and then learning some of his chord patterns, and it was like, this is unbelievable. I think from me watching other guitarists and sort of taking sort of the best you like bits of what you liked about that, and sort of branching off, and it wouldn't have to just be rock music. It could be anyone. I mean, Jeff Buckley is probably one of the best guitarists ever. His fingers, he's got like 10 fingers. Like, well, everyone has 10 fingers, but on one hand. It's like, just like
he's got 10 fingers on his whole body. Yes, so do you.
No, but on like one hand. And it's, so I think that was like the more sort of you understand, or melody, I think that to me, and then you can develop into whatever you want. And also, one string is like, you only need one string. It's like, the more
it's got all the notes on it.
Yeah, exactly. The more strings you have, sometimes it can be really overwhelming, and you're just like, I have no idea what to do. So I remember writing a lot of the songs. I have a guitar where it's like got 3 strings on it because I just can't bother restringing it. For some reason, I just go on that thing and just write a track. I'm just like, oh, there it is. Like, I think might be like, I don't know, there's less to choose from, so you're forced to have something else that you would instead have more option of.
Yeah.
I think I was explaining to someone else the other day about like the option thing where remember when you used to go into like a video store and Blockbuster and you have like 3 DVDs or something, you'd be like, I'll take these 3 home because I know I'm going to watch them eventually or whatever. But
Yeah.
now you have the choice of every single movie ever made. You're like, I don't know what to watch.
Exactly.
Like,
You spend more time looking through the menu than you actually do watching the movie or whatever.
yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
think just bring back, even if a digital Blockbuster, just put it and be like, this is all you can have. Like, there's no other way of
Yeah.
choosing.
These 5 are the new releases and there's nothing else.
That's it. Yeah, that's good. That's all people need.
Yeah. That's awesome. I actually tell people all the time because I used to be still I'm a business coach, but I did it with clients for years. I'd say, go into a restaurant and look at the menu and there's like, 5 pages of stuff there. And you're like, I don't know what to get. Like, I've never been here before. Is anything good? So you just ask the waiter or waitress and say, what's the best thing that you suggest? And you're like, I'll take that.
Yeah, yeah. I did that the other day, and I've never been more offended in my life by what I was given. So I'm going to take
Yeah. It's not always good. Sometimes it backfires, but it's like the easiest way to get over the figuring out part.
Pull the waiter's tongue out and be like, "Is this real? Like, you can't like that. How?" Like, yeah.
I absolutely had that happen probably not more than a month ago. And I was like, I wouldn't tell people to eat this if they were like my worst enemy, but okay.
But at least go through it. You're like,
Yeah.
try something different.
All right. So another thing that I'm pretty interested in is your ability to play intricate things while singing, as I mentioned before, and stay in time while you're strumming. So it's pretty impressive. One of the people, or 2 of the people that I think that do that really well are Les Claypool from Primus, who plays bass and sings, who I still can't figure out what he does because he's just, his hands don't seem connected to his body. He's like being puppeted by somebody else or something.
Yeah,
And then Claudio Sanchez from Coheed and Cambria, who just has his own like singing style that doesn't even match up. It doesn't even have to rhyme or match up with what's going on in the song. It's just like his own melody. And I'm like, it's not easy to do, but in the end, I know it comes down to, practicing and playing it, but just curious, how did you come to write in that style in the first place where what you're singing doesn't have to necessarily match up with the rhythm of what you're playing?
Oh, man, I really don't know. I think I definitely am not like a singer in jams. Like, I think if we're jamming, vocal melody or thing will come like way later, and
Yeah.
then maybe listen back to it. So I think I'm almost coming with 2 different approaches where it's like I don't think about singing live, like, so it's always just music first, and then I'll try and write a vocal pattern. And sometimes I do. I'm just like, let's fuck up Future Jack's life with writing something so difficult that he's never gonna be able to sing or play. And so I'm just like, why did I do that to myself? And then I'm learning and be like, man, this is like actually, yeah. But I'll spend months trying to learn my own songs, just being like, okay, like, is this how you do it? Yeah, okay.
Well,
And
it's
then,
good to know that it's not as easy as it seems then.
oh no, man.
Like if you could just do that on your first try, be like, well, that's fucking insane.
So grateful that there is like someone has done an ultimate guitar tabs of like our music. So every time it comes up to a tour, I'm like, I've completely forgotten how to play this, and I'm going back through like the recordings, like I can't work out what string or guitar I'm even on. What tuning is that? And then someone on ultimate guitar, and I'm just like, oh, thank you so much. So, yeah, we learn all our music.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like that's one of my things is one day I want to have all my stuff tabbed out so that way I don't have to remember it anymore, so I can go back and figure it out later.
Yeah. That's good. Or film yourself. That's always a good one.
Yeah.
I started doing that with like a computer. So I just like, this is the chord, this is the chord, that's the chord. And then for some reason stopped doing it like a year ago. So I was like, oh, I'm better than I was before. But then I was like, no, why did I not film that one? Like, okay, yeah. So
well, have you ever just thought about just making anthem songs where it's just like, hey, 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 like you don't have to remember anything.
Yeah, maybe. I'll still forget it. My brain is.
That's awesome. So one thing I also like about you guys is, well, I should say one thing. Another thing I like about you guys is entire band is that you guys make incredibly weird music videos. And you guys even did like a trilogy of claymation videos for Puke Box, Mr. Prism, and Tally Ho for the last album. And now you have some pretty interesting stuff for like Lava Lamp Pisco and Bubblegum Infinity. That Bubblegum Infinity one, that does make me actually figure that that's what I'd feel like if I was on shrooms, though, by the way.
Yeah, the old 360 cam, whatever. Yeah.
That one, so that in that video, I just, because there's certain parts where like it shows the, the feet from the head position and everything's all, in this weird fish eye, whatever. I don't even know what kind of lens that is, but then it looks like the entire world is like a small little globe under your feet. And I'm like, that freaked me out if I was in that position in real life.
I think, well, the manager Murray was like, you need a music video. And I've sort of always been against them. Because I was just like, I don't know, like we just make music. It's easy. But then I think the more we sort of got into it with Ollie Jones and a few of our friends, like Mike, who was an animator, he's brilliant. Like, I think that's when I started to enjoy the process of it, because it's just someone else being like, here's what I interpret your music. And like sometimes they're hit and miss, but like a lot of the stuff like we've been doing recently, when we can afford to give them a bit more money so they can spend what they like and just leave them alone. So it's like, just be like, what can you come up with? So Ollie Jones creates these mini masterpieces, claymation. It's like one of the best things in the world. Like, I love it. But with the Bubblegum Infinity video, I think we were Tay, and that was like 2 days before the song was coming out. I'm like, we need to think of a video, and we were like, oh god, like what are we gonna do? And we were like, let's just strap like a GoPro to our heads and go to the shitty theme park. And there was just one that was luckily like opposite the pub that we always go and drink at, Pika. And we were like, what are the chances? So yeah, it's sort of like this is great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So now you're obviously playing shows again, which is awesome. And you're even coming to the US for the first time in a long time. I'm excited, but I am a little bummed because that tour was pushed back, but I will be seeing you guys in November in LA now. You guys are doing the UK and EU this summer. So kind of, I know this is like backward seasons for you guys because you're following the summer because you're leaving Australia as winter's coming. But what's that kind of like? What's that going to be like for you guys to kind of actually get out of the country again?
I think for a long time I was terrified. Like I was sort of really beginning to feel the warmth of home and the snuggle you get from being back in a place for a long time where you just we just go to the pub again and just have a local sort of a routine. It felt nice waking up, being able to do something, build relationships again. I think it's like, actually like now we're sort of at the point where like I can't wait to just go and experience something.
Yeah. I was going to say, you're sounding a bit old there all of a sudden, Jack. I'm 40 and that sounds like me.
Yeah, that's it, man. It's like I think the whole world has grown up. But apart from some people, but like it feels like everyone who did lockdown hard, you're just like so nice now. You're just like, I have the new appreciation for my town and my city. And it's like we got through it together. And then everyone's gonna just go on holiday and they'll have 2 beers and just be like, oh fuck, ruin whatever this local community has to offer. They're growing their like palm trees, just watering each day. Like it's so peaceful here, and there's gonna be tourists everywhere in about 2 months. So. But I think, I'm very looking forward to actually playing live because it doesn't even feel like we're in a band. I feel like I'm a robot just turning on monitors and just being like, all right, like, song? Like,
that's the worst part about it, being isolated, trying to make music because you don't feel as creative most of the time.
Yeah, we have been fully Bon Iver for 2 years, just up and up.
Cool. So we'll add some links to the show or links to your music in the show notes below this episode. But do you have anything that you want to say to anything or anything else that you want to plug before we go today and let people know more about Psychedelic Porn Crumpets?
Oh, they were awful and you should stay away from this. Like,
we don't even know what our songs are about. No, I would highly recommend it. I can't wait for the new album to come out. So that comes out April 22nd. It will be the Friday after this episode airs, so it'll be good timing so people won't forget. Go pre-save it or whatever you got to do, pre-order it, do all that stuff. Jack, I want to thank you so much for being here for the awesome conversation today. And if you haven't checked out their music yet, go to the show notes below this episode for the links. If you like what you heard on the show today, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends on social media. You can see the full video interview on our YouTube channel as well. Also, if you want to check out some of our written content or any of the products or merch that we have available, go to poweredbyrock.com to read our absolutely free rocking blog full of album reviews, such as the one we did for Shyga, which we'll also be doing for Night Gnomes, and interviews and lists to keep you entertained, and find our gear as well so you can pick up some items to play and look like a rock legend. That's our show for today. We'll see you soon for the next episode. Until then, rock on.
Supposed to be easy, it's